Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present. Don't plan it, don't wait for it, just let it happen. Could be a new shirt at the men's store, a cat nap in your office chair, or 2 cups of good, hot, black coffee. Like this. A present. Like Christmas. Oh, man, that is the spot. Nothing like a great cup of black coffee.
Good morning and welcome to the Coffee with Chris show. It is Tuesday, July 21st, 22nd. Good gosh, like y'all know my birthday's on Friday. I'm trying real hard not to get to that day, so apologies. It is the 22nd of July. We have a fantastic show for you today. I've got a very special guest. It'd be, I believe, our 3rd time on this show. One of my favorite people in the world, Miss Teara Newhole, and we're going to be talking about being trans at work and gender and non-binary and gender non-conforming at work, and the conversations that need to happen around especially people who don't pass while you're at work, and how you're able to get the resources you need and the help and the support that you need while you're in the workforce. It is Gender, Race, and Sexuality Day, and that is what we do here on Tuesdays. Let me check in with y'all and change my music up. And how is everyone doing in the comments? Kyle, good morning. Good morning, Mason. Are we going to celebrate my birthday? I don't know. It's like, yeah, probably. It's my 40th, so it's a big one. So before we go any further, I want to introduce my guest for the day, the amazing Miss Teara Newhole. How are you, Teara?
Good morning, baby.
Good.
How you doing? I got my coffee here.
I see that. You get your unicorn cup.
Oh, unicorn.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling today?
I'm lovely. How are you? I'm glad I'm not in the heat.
You know, somebody thought it was a good idea for me to work out in that heat on Sunday.
Who told you that?
Well, I did a wedding. I live streamed the outside wedding.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
I was outside from like 10:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Baby, we need climate control
right.
At all times.
All times.
Okay.
It's in my contract.
It's in my contract for life. All right, global warming got me high, honey. I'm not having it.
This is not it. This is completely fat phobic.
Yep.
And so I was thinking about you the other day, because Teara, you wear exactly like 3 to 4 outfits at one time, which I appreciate. I love your outfit.
You're not wrong.
And I'm like, hold up, okay, I see where. And then you're going, okay, here. But it was like, how are you existing in this heat? There's no way.
Yeah, I don't. I stay in front of 5 air conditioner units at the I have a fan somewhere over here. Where did I put this fan? I don't know. It's over here. Oh, she right here. Sorry, got lost in my fat roll, honey. We're gonna cancel Victoria Bowmore. No more Bowmore.
Yeah, where's she
Bridget
at?
is
She's sleeping.
hot.
You know,
It
she's
is hot. I can't do it. I'm
it ain't
glad
right.
this is in the morning before the vapors start hitting
You
me.
know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And then
Mm,
it's coming earlier now, so like
man,
I'm not here for it.
me
Um,
neither, baby.
so today we want to talk about, being trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming in the workplace. So Tara, tell me a little bit more about, because you're the one who really wanted to talk about this. Tell me a little bit more about your experiences with this and why you really wanted to have this conversation today.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to be sharing our stories, our experiences, and adding context to like the dynamic language that exists around the trans experience. So much of that language has been erased from our society, that I feel like a lot of people really just don't have context for some things or are completely misinformed because the science was misinforming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, I as a person who has worked a million jobs, but has always really excelled at all of those jobs, I really kind of started to pay attention to my own experiences, so that I could best navigate a corporate world. I didn't even know that a corporate world was an option for me when I was younger. Um, College wasn't really a big option for me. Sure, I like always wanted to go to college, but um, the resources weren't there.
Right.
I i didn't know where to start, and I also got involved like with a school that like was had really bad intentions, and so I ended up with a huge amount of debt, never ended up getting my degree,
Mm.
still don't have a pathway to get that degree. um, Also, those challenges are still with me and being able to climb that corporate ladder, because of the constraints like that leadership in the world has deemed the preferred qualities of people. And I think that that's a really um, dangerous space for our people to be in.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. I I've always struggled with I hate applying for jobs. I hate applying for jobs because the
same.
scariest thing in the world that could happen is if I get an interview.
Yeah,
And if I get this interview, what do I wear? And that's where the anxiety really goes up because my name's not legally changed. So,
right,
like, all of my paperwork has my birth name and everything. I still have to check, that I'm female and all of these things have to line up. And when I show up and I am not this ideal person that they think that I'm supposed to be, that sets in for me personally as
right.
I don't want that's a level of disappointment into somebody.
Well, I actually have a lot of spirit experience on that topic, because it's something I've struggled with my entire life. And I'm sure you have too. Um, what do we wear? How do we present ourselves? And For me, I learned early on that I didn't learn early on. It took me 10 years of working to really see this dynamic and understand that I had to conform in a certain way in order to get the things that I needed, and in order to make other people feel comfortable.
Right.
And that to me was like really eye opening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I feel like so many times we, as either gender nonconforming or wherever we land on the spectrum of trans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that there's so much we have to give up in our assimilation, or unaware of in our assimilation, that um, that it's really hard to constantly be forced into a space where you don't fit.
Right. You know, in our little bubble, our little queer bubbles, and you go out to the, your bars or your certain spaces and you're like free to be yourself, and
Yep.
there are, your people are going to accept you, and then you got to remember that outside of that bubble, there are a lot of people in the world who have no concept of understanding of your identity.
Yep.
And that is a place that is very terrifying for at least me, and I know other people. So a lot of us spend a lot of time being in intentional spaces. Well, you'll see a lot of trans people working for nonprofits, or having jobs that had, like, you had a hookup, you kind of got an in, and because it's safer that way. I can only imagine what it's like to come out as trans while you're at work. And we know that the people outside of the queer bubble sees transness as, they're like, boom, you're going to be this like passing person that is okay with me and my eyes and the way, and it's like, that's not what this looks like.
No.
You know, I'm still
Not at
good.
all.
This is just what I look like right now, and I still need you to
Yeah.
respect, me as a person.
For me, it was finally an awareness that I like had to do something to take control of it in my own life. Um, and in order to do that, I kind of had to change the caliber of jobs I was working,
Mm,
right? Um, and how the fuck do you do that? How do you get out of nightlife? How do you get out of selling drugs or prostitution, or, really toxic forms of employment, to get into just like working in a bookstore or working at a coffee shop, and then go from that to being in a corporate environment or an office environment, which has its own set of politics and structure, power structures, um, and also microaggressions
mm-hmm.
and discrimination. How do you go from being completely disenfranchised to ending up being a leader?
Right,
You know,
right.
you, there's this unwritten kind of law that we're all equal.
Mm-hmm.
And it is literally unwritten, first of all. Okay. It may be in the Constitution or in the Declaration of Independence,
Right,
but there is not a social contract for that law. And one thing I think that is important to point out is that not everybody gets treated equally,
right,
right? And that's what everybody's really upset about, is that their experiences don't align with this equality that people are talking about.
right.
And their privilege, on the other side of that, right, who say that we're all equal, right?
Yeah.
Their privilege blinds them from that reality.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's always nice when you're the person that people hold doors open for,
You know,
and if
and are
you
offering jobs to.
often jobs, you drop your wallet and somebody says, "Hey, you
It's like,
dropped this."
hey, here you go.
I'm
Or gives
like,
you $150,000 to get a top line education.
right. I
You
mean,
know,
these things are not across the board and
no,
available to everyone. Uh, you know, right now in the comments, Rick and Kyle are talking about gender markers, which have been a really great step. But here's where um, I think that there's always going to be this disconnect, is your gender and the expectation of what
yeah.
the gender needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick says something really important here. The money levels are so different going from selling drugs, sex, and then waiting on a small paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if y'all hear that. My bunny is kind of going crazy downstairs. Later, I do have a giant bunny.
Of course you
Um,
do.
so that's really true. It took me, Rick, it took me 2 years to get used to getting paid a check. And then I just now, 6 years later, I'm stable with those finances and I understand the nuance of having to pay everything regularly, right? Like on like a timer. Before that, before just that simple luxury in my life, right? It was like, how am I going to get $5 to get a yogurt today? Or
Mm.
or put a couple extra dollars in my gas tank so that I can have air conditioning when I sleep in my car tonight. Or, you know, where I'm going to take a shower the next day. So
Right.
those are very uh, misaligned um, realities for trans people when they do come into the workforce. And really, I think that kind of does extend to other marginalizations too, right? Homelessness, poverty. Um, so it's not a trans exclusive experience, but it is definitely an experience that is really difficult for people of the trans community to adjust to,
Mm-hmm.
primarily because employment sources were not available and were not federally protected
Mm-hmm.
as workers, and companies didn't have to hire us based on their opinion of our nature.
Right. Right. And so I was reading this article this morning or last night or at some point that was, I don't know what time it was. Um Time is meaningless. So this article about, and I'm kind of irritated by it though. That's the best part. Because I like when I read articles and I hate them. This one was 5 essential tips for coming out as transgender at work. And this is the most riddled and privileged nonsense that I've ever read, about how you should go have a separate meetings with your manager and the HR person and then your coworkers. I'm like, that's not what that looks like.
No.
No, coming out, it could be a matter of losing your job. It could be risking your stability. And, you know, what do you
Or
do?
it could mean erasing your identity.
Identity, because sometimes you don't have the option. That's
Yeah.
not a, an ideal of being able to do that. You
So let me tell you about one experience that I think is really important. Good morning, Anita. In in 2012, I had a job that I was really passionate about. Actually, every job I've ever had, I was really passionate about, whether it was making coffee at Starbucks or, cutting somebody's hair or styling them, or, uh, selling a timeshare or a wig or, what I do now. But uh, what was really difficult was I was a trainer. I was $1 million salesperson. I worked really hard, but yet the white male leaders of this company came to me and they told me that I would never be in leadership or management looking the way I look. Now, this is before I was protected for something around gender identity. So I could have claimed some sort of discrimination around being a homosexual, but at the time I could not claim anything around being transgender. Um, and here's the thing: I cut my hair. I stopped wearing the makeup. I wore the clothes that the other managers wore, and I got the job. Right, 2 weeks later, I made it a point for that old man to see me, right,
Mhm.
and that I had changed for him, right. But what that did was that rewarded me for erasing my existence,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
For not living in my authenticity. And then I learned that behavior. Oh, when you no longer present what makes other people uncomfortable, then you're rewarded. But when you present that in a way that makes people uncomfortable, then you're often punished.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes throughout the trans experience and on somebody's lifeline, right, in their personhood. So when you're talking about from the time that they're born to the time that they die, how many times were they punished for being who they were versus
Mm-hmm.
how many times they were rewarded for being who they are? And think
Ooh.
about and then correlate that to the celebratory times that people get in their lives, and it doesn't add up. The equality is not there.
Right. I always say that the most radical thing a person can do is be themselves.
That's it.
It is by far the most yeah, it's the most radical thing you can do, is to live in yourself, because so many people do live in their existence for other people's comfort.
Yeah.
I've posted pictures of me being more femme presenting and being more masculine presenting. This is me. This is me. I right out of bed. Wipe the crusties out my eye. This is how I present on a regular basis. When
Yeah.
I decide that I want to femme up a little bit, it is not like this is not what I'm going to do when I'm going to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
The ways in which the response for me to present in the alignment of my assigned gender versus the ways that I am, I'm received as perceiving as a way that I don't align with my assigned gender is so radically different. And I don't think people do it on purpose.
Right.
I think there's a level of expectation there.
There is the level of expectation, and you're absolutely right. If we go based off of that one experience, right, and then look at it from um, how does that come down to safety? I'll tell you, Anita. Um, so when I got the job I'm in right now, I I blended, right? I felt safe, and being able to get the position, um, and being able to lean into masculinity in a way that I wouldn't normally do in my own personal life ever. But from a professional perspective, I realized that having there be a white man across the way from me who's in charge of my future, I I had to present a way to him that would be conducive of his expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the package I delivered to him needed to meet what he was able to receive. Um, and then I realized that once I became comfortable in my environment, all right, and I felt the security there, I felt like I have developed relationships that I can be open to. Um, I started to present a little bit more. I started wearing more of the clothes that I wear outside of work to work. They're still within the workplace uh, dress code, but um, I noticed that I was getting an increased amount of microaggressions once that happened. And then also a really high level of insecurity around people too, not for me, but their own insecurities,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and also some people who wanted to be allies as well. So it opened up a whole new paradigm for me. Um, but then I also didn't realize that people would also use me as a badge, right? Um, that they would be like, oh, I've got the trans person. Look how inclusive I am, right?
Mm.
And that's the thing. Um, but I leaned into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I try to find these opportunities to lean into, right? So instead of viewing that as somebody using me as a badge, I leaned into it and I said, okay, let's be the poster child then. Write an article about me and let them know that I'm the hero here in this moment, because we need to give those type of nomenclatures to trans people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually, prior to that, I didn't really ever view myself as a leader or myself as somebody who could help others. Right. It wasn't
Right.
until I heard those things come out of somebody else's mouth and they
Right.
reaffirmed that power in me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, sometimes it's just like your existence, you never know. You never know who
You don't know.
is looking at you and is like, I'm inspired right now.
Inspired. And it could be leaders,
Yeah.
right? It could be leaders. And leaders are the ones that we need to be inspiring right now.
Yeah. Uh yeah. And how do you take your you know so you've decided to do the radical thing and be yourself.
Yep.
You see a opportunity, a position for you to be a voice and a leader in this conversation. What do you do now? What's your next steps?
So I tell my story,
Yeah.
right? And then publish it. Um, that caused two things, right? That caused one for people around me to become jealous. Um, and had I known that like people were going to be mad that I came into an institution, automatically celebrated, automatically put up, don't, I mean, I put that in that context, but I worked hard for that. Uh, Not everybody gets an opportunity to be in front of a leader that has the platform to be able to do something like that, right? And you present me with an opportunity, honey, I'm from the streets. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna chop it. I'm gonna split it. I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna make it work. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And what would you tell somebody who is struggling in that situation where they get into, you know,
So right now is a really, really interesting time in our freedoms, right?
Mhm.
So the companies actually have an obligation federally to provide you with a sounding board, right? Larger corporations, which was important for me to get into a big company and not stay in these mom and pop shops who can really disseminate their personal emotion and opinion and bias as opposed to what is federally mandated, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times you lose voices in going into small companies. And you also lose that same voice in going into a big company because you just become a number.
Mhm.
But within that, and there's power in those numbers, right? They have built in programs and they have, departments and entire uh, uh, literally culturally aware processes that are meant to be triggered when new people come into those environments, right?
Mhm.
So if you're experiencing those things and you feel comfortable and safe, with an HR representative or a legal representative, start mentioning those things.
Mhm.
I found allies, right, in leadership. And I went to those leaders and I said, hey, I'm really thinking about this, how can we how can we do something about it? Um, some of that just comes from being authentic,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
I remember being in an office one day, and a senior executive came to me and said, well, uh, did you see all our stuff about this nonprofit program we've got going on? And I said,
Mhm.
yeah, actually, that's really near and dear to my heart. I've spent many years being homeless, and
Right. Yeah.
they offered me an opportunity to start making or having some focus groups within those types of communities to help the company understand how they can better meet the needs, right?
Yeah, I mean, working for, bigger companies can actually help you amplify your voice because, like, for example, my therapist, who is a non-binary black person at Chase Brexton, he or they are the only person in that department who fits that description. So when it comes down to um, who's going to be this voice for non-binary people of color, they are the one that always gets the sounding board to really amplify, you know, what this means and what this looks like. And they've really taken advantage of that as well. Like they've done the same things that you're doing. They're taking advantage of those opportunities to amplify that voice and really educate people and bring awareness into this experience. So there is that opportunity when you are in a job where you are the only. Take sometimes it's going to not be the easiest road in the world because being the only is horrible.
Yes.
But when you are the only, you can find those pots to be those representatives because they're going to be like, you're the only person that fits this description. Um, and right now everything is a political shit show. Can you
God,
can you help us? And you were like,
please.
let me give you let me up my rate real quick.
Yeah.
Because like you've now become very valuable
Yeah.
for your workplace, you know.
And that's also one of the really important things for people to understand too is, and when I say people in this context, I'm talking to leaders. I hope some leaders somewhere out there is listening to this. um, is that there are a specific set of checkboxes and preferred qualifications,
Mhm.
right? Deemed by legal and whatever state and federal um, definitions they have for the classifications of those jobs,
Mhm.
right? And then whatever the institution is able to deem how they disseminate that and disseminate their own their funds for those roles, right? Um, and some of those qualifications get the highest paid,
Mm.
right?
Right. Yeah.
It's just how it is. And while most of those qualifications aren't attainable in a learned skill set capacity, like you can't just go to school and learn how to do some of those things, right?
Right.
Some of those things you go to school for, you train, you develop methods for, you develop processes, you develop it based on experience,
Right.
right? And then
Yeah.
you become an expert on that. How are you going to become an expert if you can't even get the fucking job?
That's true. And and it is not, it's not this is one of those the subjects that, like, I think, to be honest, we might have to come revisit this as far as like getting the job, because that's
Yeah.
like a whole other thing. Because so many bigger jobs. See, I've never worked in a like major corporate environment, and I
Yeah.
haven't done that on purpose. I
Yeah.
I am
It's
terrified, like
scary. It's
the
scary. It was the
anxiety around
scariest
it.
thing I ever did.
Yeah,
Coming off the streets, learning the skills to get into an office, and then actually doing the work that I didn't even know I had the skills to
I
do.
wouldn't
I probably
even
didn't. I lied about it, I'm sure.
I wouldn't even know. Well, at this point in my life, like, I don't even know how to explain my experience.
Right,
You
right.
know what I mean? Because my
I can help
experience,
you with that, baby.
my experience is so like community driven
Yeah.
nonsense. That I've been
Yeah,
my
but
my
it's all
10 years.
work.
Yeah, my
Hold
ten
on. So
years
it's
of
all
nonsense.
work. It doesn't matter if it's emotional labor. It doesn't matter if it is personal passion labor. It doesn't matter if it is corporate labor. It doesn't matter if you are building a bridge. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's still work, right? And there still has to be some common decency, and there also has to be ladders to success.
Mhm.
Okay, I think it's important for people to, at this point, and I'm talking to people of our community now, to go ahead and now like really truly define what your wants and needs are, right?
Yeah,
And really define those wants and needs, because if you don't know what it is that you already have that you need, you don't know what wants you're tackling or going
that's so
after,
real. That's so
you
real.
know.
Yeah, because you know, this is an interesting, weird. It's a okay. Just hear me out.
I'm
So,
here.
so a friend of mine who lives in Seattle, she was here visiting, and she's in the kink community, and I'm like, I am interested. I mean, just hot and totally terrifying in all the ways that is just, right. And I'm like, hey, like, how can we hook up? What can we do? And she says to me, she's like, well, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. And so we got into this whole conversation because I was just like, I just want you to do whatever weird shit you want to do to me because I'm interested, right? Interested.
Yeah.
And then we had this whole conversation, and she was like, you can actually get whatever you want in life if you know exactly what it is and you know how to communicate it.
You've got it.
And when from that day on, I really took some time to intentionally figure out just dumb shit that I want. Like it could be as dumb as whatever it is. I
Dumb shit.
want this. And then I was like, well, how do I ask for it? And I started asking for what I wanted. And I'm not talking about like I want $1 million. I mean very specific wants that that align with my needs.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to talk to someone and being like, okay, this is what I want from you. And them being able to be like, okay, I can do that. I gotten more yeses. I've gotten more positive responses. And even if they aren't yeses, I've gotten resources. And that is such a huge part of personal development
Yeah.
and growth.
Yeah.
It's just being able to align what your wants
Yeah.
and needs are and how to communicate it because you can actually get whatever you want.
It's
Uh,
so important.
yeah, it's I that was a mind-blowing thing. I spent so much of my life just thinking that what you want is I just want to be successful or
Yeah.
and
What
it's
does
like
that mean? What are the steps to get there? How do you
right,
obtain that? How, like, what the fuck what is success? You know,
right.
and what does that look like?
Hmm.
And what of those parts of success can I do without? Because also the reality is that we may not ever achieve that success because of the choices that other people made for us many
Hmm.
years ago.
Truth.
um, and that's real. But understand that's not a deal breaker,
No,
right? That's
no.
not a deal breaker. A lot of people want to clown on capitalism,
Hmm.
but I challenge the people that say those things to view capitalism a little bit differently. Instead, view it more like a ladder, right? We have to view that this society and this age that we live in now is our opportunity to climb that ladder out of the shithole that we feel that we're in. um, and we just have to learn the language to communicate that,
Right.
right? A lot of times we're coming to an awareness, um, as we're unpacking a ton of shit.
Hmm.
Okay. And that brings thank you, baby. That brings a lot of trauma back to the surface. That brings a lot of experiences back to the surface. That brings a lot of really harsh, just realities, and you relive those every time,
Right.
that you have to kind of go back, and sometimes it really adversely affects people.
Hmm.
But also, I challenge you all to like write your own manifestos. What do you want? Where do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? Who do you want to bring with you?
Right.
And how do you empower yourself and others to do those specific things? Right.
Hmm.
One of the things I'll tell you is I felt really bad that I saw my coworkers be upset that I got praised in the magazine. But also, on the converse side of that experience, I had 300 emails from people who were experiencing some of the same things that we talked about in that,
Mm-hmm.
and how those 300 people made me aware of the fact that my institution has homeless people working there. My institution has people who are hungry and their kids are dying. My institution has people who can't get the health care that they need,
Mm-hmm.
who can't afford it.
It doesn't even make that is, and
And
it
it's
doesn't even
not
make
just
sense. Yeah.
trans people,
Yeah.
right? And so this goes back to this top level conversation of how to treat people, how to understand people,
Mm-hmm.
and then also doing some of the legwork to relieve some of that emotional labor that we're just putting on top of people who have these marginalized experiences.
Right. And it can't always be on them, and them meaning me as well. It can't be on us to constantly spend so much time and effort to make other people comfortable. There
You
has
got
to
it.
be some space for us to be ourselves,
You got it.
and then we can do the work. The work actually comes a lot easier and better and more efficient when we're not wasting time trying to make people comfortable.
So can I tell you, the first time I came on to this show, maybe 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I was just, was it 2 years ago? I think so.
Yeah, it was
I
just,
was
yeah.
just beginning therapy for the first time in my life. And, I high speed my therapy. I'm like, look, I've fucking lived in the trenches for way too long. Um, let's let's get this whatever Caucasian assimilation that people say we are equal and deserving of. Let's get this on a high speed track. I want it tomorrow. Um, and that's kind of also part of, to my detriment, right? Is that it's hard to take time to unpack these things
Mm-hmm.
so that you can better communicate um, the needs
Right.
that you have, because a lot of times it just comes off as angry, and a lot of times it's being received
Mm-hmm.
as angry, upset, and desperate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Desperation scares people of power, because that desperation means that they're willing to do something at any cost,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous for people like us.
Yeah.
Um, and I again, to me, it's a more responsibility on individuals to understand, number one, their own experiences,
Right.
their own wants and needs,
Mm-hmm.
and then to be able to communicate them.
Right. Yeah, and it is not an easy path to like
Mm-mm.
figure that out. Like when I tell you that I've had to start with that on a very like I'm still kind of on this basic level of communication on this like expressing my wants.
Right.
Like I'm at like I want a hot dog.
Yeah.
Can you get me that? Like
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. I'm not even talking about some
Yeah.
deep wants yet. And it's just learning language around
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I know that, me and you were about the same age. So like when we were coming up, there was a lot of language around our identities that didn't exist.
No.
So like
No. So
figuring
let
out
let
what
me just
box
say
we felt,
that,
yeah,
right?
like it
Let's
was a
just
whole
start
thing.
there.
Yeah.
And this generational gap between the young kids coming up and kind of people of the previous generations, right? There's a lot of language there that your elders don't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because of the fact that we've been in, and I see you coming up with the words. Okay, I appreciate that. I also understand it's going to take a little bit for us to learn them because we've been put in these boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've been forced to be in spaces and fit.
Oh
Um,
yeah. like
And
these kids have no idea, and I hate
they
doing the.
they just want to dissolve
I
gender altogether, and
yeah.
I wish them all the best power.
So
Like,
like, and I'm happy that I'm to the place where I'm like these kids. So like these kids, right? Well, when we were younger, one thing that we did have that a lot of the kids coming up now don't is something was an abundance of spaces. So when we were younger, there were a lot more clubs and a lot more bars. And especially like me, I spent a lot of time in DC. There were a lot. And every
so
bar,
I'm going to give you a little bit of historical reference there,
uh,
because I think this is also important for the younger generations too. Understand that the safe places that you have now did not exist 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
mhm,
Okay. They didn't exist even 10 years ago.
no,
Um,
it's
and
completely different.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, they did not exist in 2010, number one. Number two, understand that those spaces, right, the nightclub lifestyle that y'all adore, and some of the oddities of that nightclub culture, um, like drag, uh, was a way of life, was
Hmm.
a way of life. And actually, some of the only resources our community members had to be able to come up, right? And, or to provide for themselves,
Hmm.
to survive and feel safe, to have family. So, it's really important that I think people really truly understand that some of when you come in and you're asking for space,
Hmm.
and you're asking it from people who have never even taken that space, right?
Mm,
um how 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 are we how do Please explain to me how
yeah.
you expect to take that space and expect somebody else who doesn't take that space to give it to you.
Right. Oh my gosh. Wow. Cause okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit.
Yep, yep, yep,
So
yep.
yeah, when I first came out when I was 18, I came out on my 18th birthday. And I remember opening up the newspaper in on the back of the Washington Blade, and there were a number of like bars and clubs that existed all over the DC and Baltimore area. But here is the catch, though, which is different from what's happening today, is that
Hmm.
there's a little key underneath every single bar saying what exists in that bar. So it was either a men's bar, a women's bar, this is a dance space, this is a video bar. So like everything happens. So the only places that you could feel comfortable going to were the places that existed that fit your criteria.
Yeah,
Um, there was no bar that just said everyone's welcome.
yeah.
That wasn't necessarily a thing. And especially me growing up as this like
Unless I walked up in there, because bitch, I was taking the space, first of all. Okay,
you
go
were
ahead.
all of the things at one time.
I was taking it.
So like I remember being like, okay, so I'm a young lesbian. I don't even know how to be a lesbian. I don't really understand what this is. I think this is even before the L word really did a thing.
Yeah.
So like I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I go to the lesbian bars, and then I had to figure out how to be a person to get what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I saw someone I was attracted to. I had to see what that person was attracted to, and that was the person I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Instead of figuring out who I am.
Can I put that in
Yeah.
context for you real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Understanding the person that you are, and then also reckoning that with the person you want to become.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And understand the history behind what has made you who you are today,
Right.
um, is important. And also being able to be okay with those traumas,
You're right.
be okay with the things that have have made you who you are,
Mm-hmm.
instead of what people told you you were. Not what you are, but who you are.
Right.
Okay.
Took me many
um,
years to get to that.
that's a hard realization for a lot of a lot of people. And I'm glad that there's more modalities and there's more language around this today,
Hmm.
to help people understand. And if you're struggling with these things, please like reach out to one of us and we can direct you to psychotherapists, that can really help you learn some behavioral tools,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, to be able to develop those languages for yourself because it's a skill set.
It really is. And being able to I saw like Anita post about being able to articulate your feelings and understand what you're feeling, and that has been a learned situation too, is to acknowledge your emotions,
Yes.
and being able to articulate that, because I mean that
Package them. I call it
yeah,
packaging.
package it.
Articulation is such a
I saw. Well, I'm married to a professor of English.
we
This is
know,
what we do. It
Hammy. We
okay.
already know. She gonna school us
She
on
go
all
all
of
of
it.
the right
All,
words. Like I mean, and that, and I mean that is where I got a lot of
yeah.
the language behind some of the things I've been feeling, is from Sydney. Was she helped me find those words,
So
and it's like a
I have
fucking
a
like,
weird obsession I have to share with you.
what's the obsession?
One of my like late night obsessions is I read studies, right? And the reason I read studies is because I want to know from a scientific perspective why it is certain things are certain ways,
Hmm.
right? I don't want to know somebody's opinion. I want to know a study backed up by facts, backed up by research, backed up by modalities that can be moved on. It can be scaled up. It can be repeated in multiple different situations so that we can identify these things and create trends, right?
Hmm.
Um, but that gives me a lot of language, right? The education routes may not be available for us.
Right.
And from a financial perspective, but the information is all there on the internet, right?
Hmm.
I learned from Harvard right now because they have videos of their
Mm.
professors talking about all types of different things,
Right.
right? So right now I'm going through the same thing that a lot of presidents and politicians and leaders have learned because Harvard makes those people and teaches them the modalities that they need to know in order to make the decisions for us later on.
Mm.
So understand that the education is information and is free,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of
It's
that stuff's
available.
sit on YouTube. A lot of it's sitting on YouTube.
But just waiting
Right.
with 36 views.
Right. And you're like, what?
And then I
Um,
go to Justin Bieber with 36 billion views, and I'm just like, please shut the fuck up already.
yeah.
Or
And
I don't know who's popular, but
well, right now the last video I watched like 2 minutes of it and I had to turn it off, was Jeffree Star's apology. I was
oh
just like,
god,
this is horrible. Why are people watching this? I was like, okay.
yeah, I
Uh
don't know these people. I don't pay
no.
attention
It's
to them in my
horrible.
life.
Just racist.
Yeah, I just want to read. Let's
Yeah.
let me read what brilliant people throughout history have said and
Right.
studied, and then I can re-communicate that information. I can regurgitate that shit all day.
And that's really important too, because you're talking about people who are academic. So like my wife, who is an academic, who is writing and helping to assist write journals about queer people in a context of how this is being taught to other people, right? So
Hmm.
they do well, they do studies, so they will get a pool of people, and then they give people these like surveys to base this like academic study on, and this goes into an academic journal. The academic journal is used, and those are journals that you don't use Wikipedia to cite your work. These are the academic journals that are used to make decisions, just like you said, on how resources are allocated, what's being taught in schools,
Right.
and all these things. So these journals are super important. And when you are seeing these journals, like I'm like experiencing this with Sydney, and we're seeing the gaps in how the information is being collected. And
Right.
that's the advocacy that needs to go into, as well as making sure that one, we're being counted and collected properly, so that the journals aren't written in a way that is too based on stereotypes, not doesn't over or gloss over profiles of people who that are acknowledging us as wholes, instead of just like we're only these two categories. Maybe we need to have five categories. So it is super important, because
Yeah.
those journals do it goes so deep. When you see Congress and lawmakers, even Supreme Court, when they're ruling on something constitutional or not, they are accessing these journals for a
Listen,
basis on these
I didn't
decisions.
even know how important it was until UMBC did a study on my drag house. Um, and started culturally referring me in a historical timeline of progress, right? Um, and we've said that this progress doesn't, or this timeline does not have a beginning point or an end point, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The progress will never stop. Um, and there is no beginning point for when it began, okay? Doesn't exist, and you will never see it stop. Number one. Number two, the 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 hold on, where was I going? Bitch, I got myself off track.
Somebody wrote something about your drag house. Is it in
Oh
a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
journal?
yeah. So my drag house. So I started seeing in this context the relevancy between how my drag operates today and how like the House of LaBeija or other major houses throughout history who have been kind of beacons for marginalized community queer people, and then also understanding the complexities of the power structures within that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as I think about these things, and then I start to read further, and it's 70 pages long, and I'm like, holy shit, this
Mm.
is going to take me a couple of weeks to really get through. But I really understand that, like, wow, like, holy shit,
Yeah.
this is not drag. I'm not a drag queen, number one. Number two, um, like, there still is a major need for mothers, for queer parents, right? Um, to be out there advocating for people and also providing safe spaces. But not only just safe spaces to perform, but safe spaces to live and to be creative and to thrive and then to deal with traumas and to grow and to become the people that we were told that we were capable of becoming,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's not that so many times in our communities, those spaces don't exist from the natural biological parents,
Right.
right? And so many times those spaces don't exist from the leaders that have made the spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really difficult, but also it's not defeating, right?
Right.
Through capitalism, we have the ability to create our own spaces. We have the capability of creating businesses that are actually beneficial for people of color and beneficial for trans people, and actually empower people to attack their passion projects from a perspective that's going to help others. We actually have the ability to be able to inspire each other and to treat each other with decency, and then also be respectful of each other's ideas and thoughts, and promote that type of environment.
Right.
And they're not going to give it to us. We
No.
have to fight for it.
That's when
Number
this is
one,
exactly what you just said. You kind of have to use capitalism to your advantage.
you
you
have to
know,
lean into the things that we know are
because it's
acceptable.
like if the idea of the world or the idea of America is, uh, you know, if you want it, go get it kind of thing. And it's like, if that's the rule that we got to play with, let's figure out how we can use this to our advantage. And because if it's true though, if those that one basic freedom of being able to go up to the state house and
Yeah,
apply for an LLC gets
yeah,
taken away from you, it kills the ability to continue to create space. And I
yeah.
I get what you're saying with that. And it's just using it for your advantage in order to be able to create those things that you want to create, instead of having to go through extra steps in order to do it. But we have to, we are at an hour.
We are.
Yes, we have gotten through this show. This is like an amazing conversation. And I can only, I mean, this can go on and on and on.
I really struggled with how we were going to approach this because I'm being presented with this same topic in a lot of different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're all kind of different. Like, how do we make leaders? How do we, how do we diversify leadership through mentoring, right? How do we handle these things? And I always go back to the same spot, is like, we can't until we have this basic understanding.
Right. No, I also think that, like, when we talk about what and how to create leaders, I also believe that it's about being able to accept leadership from somebody who you don't expect to be a leader.
That part.
Because some leaders, some great leaders, don't necessarily fit this mold of whatever you think leaders are supposed to look like.
That part. So let me just and we can close on this, right? And I'm going to give you my experience from when I came to Baltimore, right? Having been somebody that was able to organize their own community with zero tools and zero resources, just based on their own ability to fucking navigate, right?
Right.
I came here and I really wanted to share my experiences and share my knowledge. And that was really difficult. Nobody trusted me. Nobody wanted to listen. And I understand why. There have been a history of leaders that were that abused those privileges, right? And at no fault of the person on the receiving end of that. And so it made a really difficult landscape for me to try to navigate. And 5 years later, right, I'm still navigating that, still trying to figure out how to really tackle some of the tough issues that we're facing, how to moderate those conversations, how to develop the language for those conversations, how to make people aware of their own privilege in those conversations, how to make people really become passionate from a different perspective of those conversations as well. And that's really difficult. And one of the only ways I've really been successful is to just like, okay, fuck it. I don't want anything from anybody. All I'm going to do is ask you to be your best self, right? And listen. And if you can listen and you can watch and you can start to see the changes, right?
Right.
And I've now done this with Stacha. I've done this with Trey, with Pariah, with Princess, right? With Taylor coming into my situation was just a breath of fresh air, right? Because I didn't have to explain some of these nuances to them. They see them freely, right? They've experienced them and they have a full spectrum of opinions on it, right? And some of them are really far out there, but you know what? I used to say it, right? Be problematic, right?
Sometimes you have to. If we don't take the time out to just start the conversation, then we never get to the end. Right. There's never ever some kind of learning process for anybody.
So we need to quit canceling each other, right? Yeah. We need to listen to what the other person is saying, because in those experiences, whether or not it's aligned with what you're experiencing or not, or what's on your agenda, it's still a valid experience. And no two experiences are the same. Right. And there may be some insight within that experience that offers you some clarity as to why or how to best approach some of the things that you're dealing with.
And just to piggyback off that for counseling people, because I am here for opening the door for conversation, but what I am not here for is willingly educating someone who could educate themselves.
That part.
So, like, I'm here if you want to have a conversation around your experiences, but I am not here to be your academic journal based on my experiences.
I love that for you. I'll help you write that manifesto. If
Right. Oh, Tara, I love you so much. And I miss you so
I
much.
miss you so hard. I
Oh,
can't wait to
gosh.
squeeze you.
I know I missed you.
Oh,
People,
it's been too long.
it really has. It really has. Thank you so much for being
You're
on the
more
show.
than welcome. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be able to like be talking about these things.
Such a good conversation.
Anytime.
And I'm going to come back to the Zoom meeting in a second. I'm going to close out the show.
Okay.
All right. So everyone, thank you so much for watching the Coffee with Chris show today. It's been, this has been a great conversation, and thank you so much. So, quick news. The show is moving. We're moving to YouTube, and I'll be officially streaming live on YouTube starting August 3rd. So now is the time for you to go on YouTube and subscribe to the Coffee with Chris show on YouTube. You can also check out our website, thecoffeewithchrisshow.com. You can watch past episodes on there as that's getting built out. So much stuff. I can't give enough thank you and praise to Amy for stepping in today and posting all the links and everything to Tara's social media. So thank you so much, Amy. Until tomorrow, we have the question of the day, which is, what is your birthday tradition? I do kind of the same things every year for my birthday, so I would like to share those with you, and I would love to hear from you as well. So until tomorrow, have a fantastic day, and stay inside and stay hydrated. It's hot outside. All right, y'all, have a fantastic day.